Gerber. The contemporary age. Um, the French Revolution, this is why at the beginning of the contemporary age, saints they rebel against to the nobility and the kings, because the conditional in which the people live and worked were inhuman. By this I meant that many of the people survived more at that whole week beyond, and this ineffable the people and they fall the fire for their ranks, overthink and oppressive and dictatorial system, putting into effect more democratic system and that the human ranks, where respect living began the old regime that was formed by trade groups called states. The first state is a crunch, the second the nobility, and the third is the population. This caused a radical change from feudally to capitalism, which a more sustained system. This removed the great gap of social and economy equality that exists in the old regime. Some of the most important events of the French Revolution were the Battle of the Revolutionaries against the Catholic Crown and the end in the 1719, where the authority of the crunch to impossible takes of the groups was eliminated. The privileges of the clergy were also eliminated, and their goods were confiscated. This was achieved by massacre president of the Catholic Crunch, they ground France. They were a very hard years for the clergy and for the fight. All these events and on December 11 in 2905, when on the Third Republic sentences the definitive separation between the crunch and the state. The most important event of this time is Declaration of Human Rights. This is a basic thing that a man can have that not another can them always. In his work clearing that the ring of men and cities excluded women. Today's sentence something very disposition because men and women were equally in the age of the law, but after 2 years that in um, 1793, the politic activists Olympic of the Girls proposing the rights of women and saints. The industrial revolution, that time is very good because it was a time of evolution of the human being. At the end of the civil 18th century, in the United Kingdom began the industrial revolution. The first man who invented the steam engine was James Watt. They were used in different areas of the socialist, that is to say the main of they were for a common good should the first textile factory that use a steam engines. Many other such metal factories also helped a lot with great invasion, but if what's to emancipate some that was of great import was the Railing Saint is one of the most important events in history, since it was the first steam again that cloud transport of so many people and such heavy loads, and it's carried at that time. After this big introduction of the Industrial Revolution, the First World War. This began in 1914 14, and 8 years later in 1918. This was an armed conflict that divided the Greeks powers in two position sides. There were a triple alliance, which was formed by Germany, Australia, and Italy. And on the another hand, we had a triple entente, which was formed by France, Russia, and England. Some of the hand the trip so the reason with that armed conflict looked a place where the tension between Germany and France, by the Franco-Prussian, where a tension between Russia and the Austria for the Balkan Peninsula, was uncles the Great First World War, in which there were a lot of political and military alliance, and the after millions of deaths and homeless families from the battles in different sites. There was also economic crisis in Europe. These were words that suffered that consciently, since many of the tales were breaking, wall sites were looted, and therefore the economy of Europe suffered a great blow during and after the war. After these terrible events, where developed several new war weapons, such as tanks and the aircraft, the Claire of Versace was seen on the June 18, 1918, ending the First World Wars. Um, uh, Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution was caused by different reasons. Such the people were not happy with the regime that were impossible on the people. Russia was among these alboilist and the scum monarch, and the people were not happy with the treatment that the nobility um, offended to the people because they are treated as inferior, and they had to work, and they working to make to the power family of Russia happy. They are two social classes, the nobility and the people who were poor. They turned in the very unfair way to which all the people had to um, and there was a monopoly of wealth and the land. This the worth of Russia at time, because the nobility decided how much each family had. As you can imagine it, they were not very first because we are there were power in the people cloth to water they want, and they did not care if they had a roof to sleep under, a food for their children. This revolution was a lesbian morally socialist, with which were unable to defeat Nicholas II, and new president was established at the hands Alexander Kerensky, after which began the second stage for the Russian Revolution at the hands of radical socialists. This led to the old regime impossible in the Russia was completely elimination, as were the privileges and equalities that existed in the state of Russia, and this end the revolution Russia led by radical communists. The Second World War. This armed conflict broken out in the Europe in the 1939 within the coalition Kayet Ehem. This was composite of the following countries: the Germany, Italy, and the Empire of the Japan. And the allied powers, the French, Great Britain, and Great Britain, and the USSR. This armed conflict lasted 6 years. That is to say, in the conflict year in 1945, on the most relevant cause for this armed conflict to happen was the revenge engagement of Germany. Although we think that is does not make sense because Germany wants to sacrifice thousands of the people in war just to win. Um, the Cold War. This latent conflict was between the two great superpowers, whereas Europa, which was allied with the United States with a democracy regime and capitalist economy. On the other hand, we are Eastern Europe, included by the Soviet Union with a dictatorial regime and the social economic. It should be emplaced in the Cold War was not an armed conflict, but a conflict of theirs. Of course, they were armed encounters, but not directly influenced by this conflict. What is my opinion by about to feminism? Feminism is a one of the march that are seen more often today, but many of these people who call themselves feminists don't not can now what they are looking for because many of they only do it for fashion. This means that many of the rich favor men that currently, and this is a lay because in the constitution means that in the age of the law we are equal regulations of sex in the um, that ancient feminists in the true feminists because in those time women that not even have the right to education and they found to be taken into account in a society dominated by men. I think that the true feminists are our grandmothers because they did life a great inequality when they belonged and society and have a job to the fear the children and not only be the housewife but and the exemplar woman who can lead a group of men. Uh, the four waves of the feminine. The first wave of feminine focus on the demolins the feminine role as subordinate and sovereign on the male and the political object to the achieve this were claim to gain the right to vote, which could give the power to access and equally education as well physical and the financial freedom for the male guardians. The September of the first the first wave of feminists focus on the productivity and sexual rights, feminine empowerment, anti-colonialism, and the beginning of the international approach, meaning that we wanted to be increasing independent from men and to have more and more control over their decisions when it came to procreating children. The third wave of the feminine focused on the internationally and the care theory and the the 1980 was a particularly hard decade for LGBT community. The public responsibility to the in the SPMID make clear they to create organization that will advocate for the human destiny of the heteronormative people, gender, and the sexuality began to be a focus of both the feminists and the LGBT movement. The specific consequence of the space-time moment in the queer theory. In the four wave of the feminist internet in the years 200 we was their thems are sexual harmston, the harmston of the physical beating and the rape culture. We are not talking about simple use, but they are not new. 18 feminists has had to constantly reflexively is self saintly in the beginning, which they want to control the feminists was are constantly change, and they have to evolve to welcome fail the against this society. Um, the most uh, the most important uh, feminist woman in Ecuador. Um, Manuela Sáenz, this is a very clean example that feminine power something exempted that of men because this woman saved Simon Bolivar in the conspiration September in Bogota, receiving the name of the liberator. This woman broke the stereotypes impossible by men, and they use it to say the women are not suited for the war, and ignored them in the case of the battle. But this woman change is a perspective, and I consider it one of the most important parts of the Equatorian feminism. She died of November 23 in 1809 no 56 in Peru. Uh, Ana Peralta, um, the um the Ambateña stand of the story violating a great progress to claim for the Spanish provisions to province the use of indigenous or Spanish clothing to the mestizos. This woman floating for the rain to express health, and she deceived because we are prohibiting the clothing of the home tool. We as a very angry and formed for this abuse of the power before the people of the different buildings, and the shit made in the very clear. If you want something to change, you have to fill with all your standard. So she's got it a cold wear a traditional clothes of the her belief and not the impossible by España for Spain. Rosa Cabeza de Vaca, this woman and studied the um, authorities of Mejian school in the 1903 when the amplified for the environment in the education establishment where at that time only men stood there. This woman was a of the great inspiration of all Ecuador, um, mainly because most women did not graduation for high school, much less get education. This woman was example that stock the enter study um, body because she graduation from a men's school, which says a lot about the courage of this woman. Maria Zúñiga, after range the beams of the integrants woman to high school and the range the Beccauley. This young one was at the first graduation. A doctor, she found for that she liked the most, which was to save lives on the parents of the patients and those become on the vet's doctor. There was because she have to drown a lot of the discrimination in the college and the many challenge that teacher made her so that she could not achieve her dream for graduation from college uh, and this became the legend that is today because she was the woman who promoted female education. My conclusion, feminist has a can now it's not always being like this. It used to be much more difficult that today for the simple reason the before women were they allowed to leave the house that is with it's so difficult with support because many of the fails to be mistreated by the husband and the to correct feminists that not verbal that we are grandmothers did for their because dance to exempt they can education and freedom of expression. The feminism has to improve and stop asking for equality and begin to see the equality. They have against in my men because two when think they are less and much less we think they are smarter than us the clarity men areas they are better the better that men and we should not find among us it if feminism is not a fight thing between men and women if a fight between good people and bad people. She is my she is my friend and she will give her opinion of the class.
Okay, my name is Romina, and I found this topic very interesting since I'm still not thought this topic in school. I understood that the French Revolution was the beginning of the working age. The people were inflamed with this. I mean that many of the people survived more than a whole week without eating. This year, the people I fought for their rings overthrowing and oppressive and dictatorial system putting into effect a more democratic system. I also found it interesting that human rights were respect leaving behind the old regime that was formed by three groups called states. The first, I think that was the church, the second, the nobility, and the third, maybe the population. I like the fact that the battle of the revolutionaries against the Catholic Church, and then in 1790, where the authority in the church to impose the taxes on crops was eliminated. And also some of the privilege of the clergy were eliminated and their goods were confiscated. This had been archived by massacring priests of the Catholic churches all over France. Okay, I found it interesting that the Second World War was called Ehem, and that this was composed of the following countries: Germany, Italy, and the Empire of Japan, and the alien power French, Great Britain, and USSR. This armed conflict lasts 6 years, I think. And that one of the causes of was the revanching norms of Germany. I thought we think that this doesn't make sense because Germany wants to sacrifice thousands of people in a war just to win, because it is exactly what happened the war happening only for an ancient rivalry. I thought it wasn't only this, also influenced that economic rivalries that had the powers of the time. And something that scared a lot was the policy of territorial expansion, sorry, initiated by the Third Reich, but as all evil must fall, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed their surrender. Thank you, Joaquin, for the class.
Thank you.